after all these things, share the ebano. First, now cook if you be a chocomilo. And how many chocomilos do you see? Me pegana ni bakwa. Obeka chrem or Ghana say. Waba America, wako Asia, waka Europe, Bronia or talk Ghana chocolate, a favorite, odi de bia. Mibusao. I am asking every single person, and that brings us to the cocoa board matter. Mibusao say, da bay na uya Ghana niya, wako shop wa broche, UK na woteno, you America no, we Asia, we Gyan, Europe no. Da ben wo say bro ni bi say I'm yearning for Ghana chocolate. Da ben na who be da. Ask yourself why. I'll explain to you. Cocoa Kwadwo mo hwe me nne. And the story aba nyina say Cocoa Board pays 237 million Ghana cedis to cocoa farmers. And a Cocoa Board John Mahama after paying 10 billion to a pensioner for Bawumia beji omunsem sika no. And upon all that is happening around the world, you know, cocoa bought every 11,000, abedu $3,000, no. John Mahama still, or say we a cocoa queenie, and I said we my stress so. Because cocoa queer no, I could and the medicated show with mamma and say, the mutated when Jenny and Quasiasem, a hana no creno, maybe chibi be much trouble. Oti in Sembe Branipe car, I am personal issues with Nipana or the head of Cocoa Board, Randy Abbey. A man for have personal issues with him. I am not here to discuss Randy Abbey. He's not my priority. My priority is Cocoa Queenino. Now, before I move on, let me explain this. Yes, Cocoa Board. Sika 273 million Ghana. John Mahama said, Muntie Kwadwo. Now, last 2 weeks or last week, a finance minister Atofosson Ebekinkai, a new reforms, and as a reforms are. Cocoa Board edeba because of cocoa hunsen semaba. Now, sa sika we aban twato no. We kwani na wo hwemia. Mo a aban agimu cocoa seats. Mo a mo se mo de cocoa ama aban a mo twan se betua mo ka no. Aban no is going to pay the old price. Enti sa sika we cocoa kwani bia cocoa wa aban ho a yenya ntua wo ka no. E also tia say new price no affect sika ye betua no. It is 2,500 and now we expect here. Sa 2,500 no eno and a bed day. Yadibe maun. Now 237 million Ghana cedis no. Yadema amwa omuka se oh me twa me koko me diamba aban o aban nya ntua ye. Mo amu koko wa aban ho a ye nya ntua mo kan John Mahama say time na wudi wo koko ne koma aban no. Sika na ye tonu koko no eno ne ye betua wo. Now from afi we kono koko fufuro na ye betwa no eno na sebio price na asesa eno ano no mema otwe bia na adaw enti so ye koko kwani na wo hweme na se wodo ukoko ama aban na aban ye ntua wo ka se aban fro se beji usika aban etua sa ebo na ewo ho no because emra ye hyehyɛ den ye hyehyɛ sa emra fufuro we no na ukoko ne de ewo aban samu dada. Edi sana ukoko no aban samu dada. Also oti ase se aban etua obetua den ebo na yetua mo dada no enye ebo fufuro ya Abbey. If you say time na wudi koko ne koma aban se aban ma usika no na aban nya fa enhyehye fufuro emba ye se yate koko so. Enti uye koko crutch koko kwani na wo Ghana also oti ase se na ukoko aduaban ko wa aban ho ana ukoko sis wa aban ho a sa 237 million Ghana no ukwaji usika ye betua wo first price no de na wo ho dada no from 2027 2028 into 2027 na omoba betua 2026 dia eno na emra foforo na ya hye no ebeka sa akoko no na ene de wa ukoko wa aban ho bia sebio na ukem se abanya ntua me koko maame abanya ntua me koko maame ansa na emra foforo we ba no ukwa akwaji ukoko de sika also ti ase se ekadada ba ko na eda ho no 2005 was 2500 said na ye gemu no ye de mamo no eno na aban eba betua mamo asamasa asam foforo bi eni wo afeni ye be kan de aba ho asam ne gidigidi bi anim eti bisramo Mamu ma NPP fo nkeka nkwasasem bia nkyerɛ mo. Mamu tie o mamu nim nyansa. Mamu ma Jimmy fo bi nkogina kokwa ase. 8 years obi amegina kokwa ase no mo ankasa. Ofiri power afo no begina kokwa ase no kasa. Dia ya so no se obegina kokwa ase ni Jimmy no hu wi a na wafa V8 abetena nkran. Kyese ohu so wa Jimmy. Mi kyerɛkyerɛm 237 million Ghana cedis no. So ukoko wa aban ho nko ade a se yetua wo kana ye betua wo ekadada no ba ko na na e wo ho no. Eka foforo ya Abbey enya ne betua wo. Nti ye rest assured uye koko kuani a also tell say aban ba be ma odien aban ba be ma sa de ne etua wo dada na from 2027 ekono na omu tua 2026 27 a eno na price no besa. Now, answer na mekoso no. Me be say Ghana for eti bibiase. And the kind of people we are dealing with as a political party, eye NPP. Mukai. Say na wuti say NPP for catch us say. Kokwe for ye domo na MDC aban abeji kokwe for ye ntia omoboa. Uni bibi, omgi nsem wajimi. Time na NPP wo power. Ena eye team yebusa Bawumia that time on na cabinet or chair cabinet because the kufa obi anim so a vegetable wanum wi wabodam yebusa Bawumia say koko NPP ewo power yebusa say koko won sensam koko board e collapse koko akuafo bre una wo ye vice president una sika ne tawa taso una wo ye the head of economic management team una na so unim wiase nyansa nyina montie response Bawumia edema eye Ghana for
Cocoa board is on the verge of collapse. I'm not aware of that, but we'll look at that. I cannot comment on that. It's not. I don't know where the data is coming from. Cocoa board is on the verge of collapse. I'm not aware of that, but we'll look at that. I cannot comment on that. It's not. I don't know where the data is coming from.
Oya vice president ne kufu ara sata wa num wi ada. You say 2024 Cocoa board igu. Cocoa nsensama say o say I am not aware. What did you catch mo? That time na koko kuafo twen de Bawumia beka na o se ento abama na medi president Ghana for busa say sia no 2024 ye koto aba 2024 what na be mu 8 years ye nyina nim de koko fo fam koko kuafo bre koko bo no krampo no egu na wagye nkyere ne say o se ono onya awe onim ontumi nyia no akwawe ntino makogira koko nuase a omugimi omo no ye busa no hata no kuta tumi onka bibi mponche koko akuafo a ebuo kakra wom koko akuafo miame nim se woni maso ka oso no onya we mofam kwasese mumfiri ni so ye busa o se we are vice president wo si entoma we the vice president 8 years wona wote cabinet wona we the head of economic management team wona Ghana sika sam hyehyɛ wo si entoma that means that we plans for cocoa board we plans for koko akuafo 2024 na say o plans ne saying because you need to Ghana ha cocoa board no egu koko akuafo bre wo answer ne saying kire bibi say my reason ti ayenkoto mawo say na be de tumi mawa obe kire say koko akuafo da wakoma so Bawumia ka chom say onya we say koko akuafo bre
cocoa board is on the verge of collapse. I'm not aware of that, but we'll look at that. I cannot comment on that. It's not. I don't know where the data is coming from. Cocoa board is on the verge of collapse. I'm not aware of that, but we'll look at that. I cannot comment on that. It's not.
No, see Ntwabama no. Only idea biao. He cannot comment on that. Somebody who wants to lead Ghana. Now, if you are not aware of that, then it means you were not aware of anything. So why were you even the vice president? A whole vice president. Yeah, the Omaya show in some 8 years. cocoa board egu cocoa kuafo bre. My answer will say onya word or you can't speak to the only data. And then kwasiafo we egu cocoa asese nkokuo ya press conference. Ye do cocoa kuafo because omu bu cocoa kuafo so omujimi. That is what they believe in. You see, NPP for doing say e kurase da ho Ghana. NPP for trimuno. Omadwene am say Ghana da ho 1962. Ghana da ho 1992. Omu we cocoa kuafo say NPP for adwene mu cocoa kuafo e kurase for sa na omadwene ye omo. Omadwene say and ye ka cocoa kuani a omugin say ye obi a otie kurase bi a onim de ekoso won kran. Oni de ye ka brofo on tiase sa na NPP for hu cocoa kuafo. Enti omugin say omukogina cocoa fuo bim na omofre NPP for delegate say mondresi ti samu ye cocoa kuafo omu wia na mafoka abetena nkran say monhwe cocoa kuafo omunim de echen mo amoten nkran no cocoa kuani bi anim world market of cocoa prices na ekofuma cocoa kuani bi anim say cocoa ye tuma cocoa kuani bi anim enti don't think say wukọ ekurase kogina dua bi ase cocoa efuo bim na obi ka say cocoa cocoa kuani or NPP ni or chairman why 20 years no no or cocoa for 20 years obi a cocoa for 40 years kwasi ampenyi na ogina oye me na my cocoa 20 years and menti bi da no me see wo so cocoa 20 years a your cocoa kuani nyanseri bi a wo cocoa 40 years. And that person cannot decide for cocoa kuafo nyina. Cocoa kuafo mo Ghana 90% only nyansa cha NPP for. And I'm saying this because NPP no, a political party like NPP no, omu Ghana for biasi nyina ye Jimmy. Omu cocoa kuafo because senke party omu ni nyansa, they will not even dare go and stand in cocoa farms to say you see at world prices so into cocoa kuafo mahame sisimo asem we utibi wen e kire we Jimmy. Cocoa kuani a oni NPP tenaye we nya free fertilizer da. Cocoa kuafo ni NPP tenaye we nya free spray da. Cocoa kuani any NPP tenaye we nya free insecticide da. Cocoa kuafo ni NPP tenaye omu cocoa kwa ye mewe kwa ni emfi omo. Enti dia na obeka che cocoa kuani na ka je nso wuje we Jimmy enti mu ye cocoa kuafo mu nyina mu bedi echi nyamfa tumi ma Bawumia say yebusa ni 2024 cocoa kuafo bre cocoa bodigu osi emfa no ho oni answer na woni answer na de tumi ama obi a wo kwase ka kire say menyi tumi ni mfa ma wo abodam oni answer na matam tumi ni de ama obi na obi manage na o take care of the mess you left her o say enu ntimi ntam tumi ma wo na mo jimi ayamosora mo sa Agyapong fie anase kurukuri na mo de sa ye jai space na mam kakra na mo jimi mo ho ena mo jinse cocoa kuafo agimi mo jinse cocoa kuafo nim nyansa mo jinse mo tete politics na mo ye no the same thing mo ko gina ekuro bi so a ana jeje beku ye maame ana jeje beku ye ofa me kan wo ofa so na ekromfo sa politics na twam now mumye wo wagon nim wagon ni nyina na say team stay with me cocoa once in summer abagana. The question is, cocoa kuani ben na wo Ghana sisia onim se cocoa price yate so wo wiase cocoa kuani bi anim. Every single cocoa farmer knows say cocoa price around the world eswate. Time na NPP te so. Cocoa e wiase bo kosoro. Cocoa wiase bo kra kosoro no. Senior na e was NPP for etum ema cocoa kuafo no kroma anye. E kodu be 11,000. Still NPP they were not able to pay cocoa kuafo what they deserved. Nobody said anything. Cocoa kuafo eye adwuma no. E da ho supply Ghana aban cocoa. Ema Ghana aban agi cocoa no. Cocoa mo giye e ho besia omkogi bediye. Sika na also butiama cocoa fo no kwampo no sa sika akoso no mafa mo enso sebio cocoa fo no cocoa kuafo no hweka omo ni hwege e no mugi sika no sa yemre nim aban asesa me I'm not going to go into the blame games and the dig it no maybe is simple amount aban asesa cocoa na ewiase ton 11,000 and a cocoa na bedu 3,000 the same cocoa kuani na onim se cocoa ye ton 11,000 NPP aban entuma mani sika ese no who expect cocoa kweni na and when we say to cocoa 3,000 no or expect to say betua no the same eboa yetua time ana cocoa 11 enya sa na ye no bibia we ase. And I like the idea say the president of Ghana, John Mahama no, or a cocoa farmer, or one of the biggest farmers in Ghana. And ordinary example say, dear AC in Neno, me John Mahama, me cocoa fu. Say cocoa ya to a bag $30,000. I mean, many sikache nipa bibri o Ghana. Si ati cocoa so about 3,000. I me boka ti say cocoa kwenibia. Inti dear AC no, and John Mahama na koshe dem, ana Randy Abbey. Ana NDC abai na kwashe dem ka say yanti cocoa boss why na be yesa. Nobody would do that. Into cocoa kweni na wutie mi a mesrew ma wadwene mra na mencha bibi mu nkirew. Hwe aban wei ne atikrom ha from tete ena na yetu gold wo Ghana. Yakọ different aban ko edrum pempenso bi na ye ka kire ho se gold a yetu nifa so ben so ye nya wo so yanka kire ho until aban bi ba ye ka said abi e was said bibi e fe gold board ba but aban ba ko ma aban ba ko edum pempen so bi na Ghana for ka kire ho se gold a yetu no Ghana e ho fa so ben na ye nya and Ghana for yentumi nka sa asem ni biem adentra if you say NDC aban ba ye no obe make sure say or the reforms bi abeka ye gold no ho amende gold board no opa Ghana economy no adia eso na sene pa eka ho a e gold and the Ghana ni bia nim say as a nation yenya gold ho mfaso from the day I started to go to Ghana. This is the time yenya gold ho mfaso pa eboa oman no it at every particular time I was say eye oman bia etumi tena se na otu de ni hwe na chi na obusa ne ho say ewiase sesen yen so I was say yes sesa ye nyoma I was say yes sesa sene ye nyoma I was say nyina ti ase so ekoko kuani na wo hwe me a koko na ye ton no 1962 no sene na ewiase ehu koko emra koko yi ni ti na ewiase nyina en develop ya na yehu koko no and any was abiemu and in some way ni kan ding but osameka koko na ye value no 59 years ago, 79 years ago, 60 years ago no and the koko ankasa opa ewiase a koko sebio eni anwodin na ewo emre bia na sebio na ewiase yenhu de na yepese de koko ye anase other alternatives to cocoa. The reason why it here cocoa na one of the first class commodities around the world na sebio cocoa kutaweti se gold no na ye ni alternative to cocoa wo wiase na wiase developing bedroot how pointer na ye kra Ghana na adwen say Kwame Nkrumah de cocoa free Fernando Po bedru Ghana no na ye nko na edua cocoa at a point ye tirim no na adwen say ye nko na cocoa ebia ye ni any Seychelles nko na cocoa but that idea na sasa and any idea keko that cocoa revolution time no as some because the world no cocoa now has become a commodity. Almost everywhere you go in the world there's cocoa. Enti we cocoa kwani wo Ghana. Sebio also tia say enya wo nko na wudia cocoa. Enya wo nko cocoa na brofo pe. Enya wo nko cocoa na efu ana enya wo nko cocoa na de bodin. Ye wo aman bebre wo Ghana me no ka sei. Eno na ema cocoa bo no etumi kosoro na aba fom hwi. Na obusa won say na nye cocoa na papa di jaye yi. Enye cocoa we na yesi cocoa de we cocoa kwani a usika de podio ampa ende opese usika e podio a onsa beka na opese o ho kire wo so a o ho be kire me kire wade kuro se cocoa kuafo mo Ghana se mo pese munya cocoa mu sika me kire mo ne ena se mo pese mo ma NPP fo daada mo mu cocoa kuafo no na se mo pese mo beboa mo ho a NPP fo daada fo we on be ma no ehia mo and that is the reality. Mamentra wade o sa de we sa list we am de kire we top 10 cocoa processing countries based on recent data uba wiase a inkura omu edua cocoa ye hu adwuma pa emudu omu no mgu ho no me kire we cocoa kwani atie me nyoma sesa eba cocoa eba se ne edi cocoa hudwa eba se ne abrofo pe cocoa eba se ne cocoa ne yadwen se ye ne Abidjan kwa nyoma asesa enti imredu se cocoa akuafo se ne yetumi dani gold and gold abeso economy ni mu no imredu se yebe dani cocoa nani na cocoa no so abeye a vital commodity even though the world majority of the world reject cocoa no we can make money out of cocoa. Now check here number 1 Côte d'Ivoire. Omo produce about 31 to 45% of global supply. We are say we oha enchichemu edua sabako ekopem eduonan enum oha enchichemu eduonan enum a Ivory Coast de tumi produce cocoa pa. Omo friwa Ghana na toso. Yanso ye produce Ivory Coast friwa ye na ye toso. Ufriwa no abakuro ben so Indonesia. Tete kwa shibu kofa cocoa seed ni bae no. Ni adwen se yankwa ene bebi a cocoa seed ni free bae no yankwa na dua cocoa dabi. And the third country where we are say processing cocoa, Indonesia. The fourth country, Ecuador. The fifth country, Cameroon. The sixth country, Nigeria. Brazil, produce cocoa, process cocoa. Ekrobit is Peru. Ekrobit is Dominican Republic. I've been there before. Ekrobit is Colombia. Now, so we shall list more Africa nkro sign the womb. Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon. 4 countries out of the 10. Meaning, there are 10 countries where we are seeing African countries are processing cocoa. So, you mean Ghana can say, I say cocoa creating it say sebio manisi sumina so onon kwa ne produce cocoa inte o say cocoa bono edu pompan so bi dabi. Europeans nanya other alternatives, other markets. Omonya market fufra. Almost all ready say cocoa beans in omo beto. The difference between Ghana and Ivory Coast for cocoa no, the amount of no sometimes no omoni ji cocoa do wanna say. Ivory Coast for the processing time of the processing cocoa no is faster and quicker than Ghana. But you see, the quality of the beans, Ghana beans, a quality chain Ivory Coast. The reason is Ghana cocoa kweni ocha cocoa na. Ghana kweni ocha cocoa na or the or pie cocoa no. Now the kogu ayedien apatamu na wahata cocoa no na ordinansa aden adani than the cocoa no apeni ma cocoa no natural sunlight and aden awuku no enti Ghana kweni no ocha cocoa na. From the day of cocoa ne fum, ekodu time of the begu bottom no, sa cocoa no, everything about it is natural. Cote d'Ivoire for no, almost soja ewo apatanase. They force the cocoa to dry. And in Cote d'Ivoire, they can make about 2.5 million tons. Now Ghana make it around 600 to 700 tons. Because yenye process no ewa. Cote d'Ivoire for process no a short. In the Cote d'Ivoire for no, also Ghana cocoa no, yedi begu apataso near the ensa fifem near dane no na ewie boso na ha dane na ha wo na Cote d'Ivoire for no omdi gu apataso no masoja wase na ejane heat no yedi ewu cocoa no enti Cote d'Ivoire for no Ghana ni ekotwa cocoa ana onya boto edua onya wo adwumawie na di be bosome baako sa Ivory Coast ni no within 4 days na the cocoa nyina awo enti sa wo study a yene cocoa na go through the natural process. Ivory Coast for there, no, it goes through a very quick and rapid process because they are looking at more cocoa seeds, selling it and making money. But we are looking at their quality. We are looking at sustaining our quality and also making sure say it is all natural. And anything I offer Ivory Coast for the amount of cocoa they are able to ship out of Ivory Coast. And the yet to me ship na difference the gap if you say. Yene no your process ni nyina no dey natural. Ivory Coast for there no omo di heat and omo de eden omo tumi de eden ema omo cocoa ne wo nti Uganda ni bedi 1 month Ivory Coast ni 1 week na the cocoa awo na ekọ. Now I couldn't tell me cheche we mu nyina akire on say there ama cocoa ebo akofom nipa bebre e ka say na ye den na cocoa bo etimi akofom to the point eye affect eye Ghana cocoa kuafo mamenchro. You see this? Global market collapse. See, world cocoa prices fell drastically after peaking at over 11,000 to 12,000 per ton in 2024. Now, prices plunged to around 3,300 to 3,400 per ton early 2026. Say cocoa around 2024. Now your ton back could be almost $11,000 to $12,000. For some reason, cocoa born at in 2026, at the end of turn between 11,000 to 12,000 a ton, and they turn $3,300 per ton. Now, what was I say? A day now costs their costs are simple. Improved harvest in Ghana and Ivory Coast after years of drought and disease. For a long time, na cocoa, na sebio yare, eni nyoma ebegu suninti, na Ivory Coast ni Ghana, yentumi twa cocoa dodo. And the amazing say, yentumi twa cocoa dodo between Ivory Coast and Ghana, no, there's a lot of cocoa in the system. And make cocoa beans, no. For about a year now, cocoa in sorry to ye, yare wa na egu cocoa sini nyina akofom. Ama Ivory Coast ni Ghana, cocoa sebio ye chano, cocoa beans a ye nyano, aburuso inti ebuso. Now, secondly, new supply from Ecuador and Latin America. Ecuador for and around Latin America, no, almost has started producing cocoa in large quantities. Very large quantities. Until right now, the market is seeing a high level of cocoa seeds in the system. Latin America for produce and then because they cocoa. Just said there's an increase in the amount of cocoa Latin America and Ecuador for air producing. Now share the last factor in Tiama cocoa at 11,000, Abedu 3,000. The last factor here, weak demand, is as chocolate makers raise retail prices and reduce cocoa content in products. And oba bruchira, so cocoa product bia, whether it is chocolate, whether it is peanut butter or whatever, cocoa content womb less than 30%. It means say first now bro for to cocoa no do because normally cocoa do na ye cocoa drinks. The cocoa do and the chocolate. Say bro for I find the other means. Inti hia cocoa beans too much. Now to me create cocoa flavor. Inti technology to my bro for right now or Germany or to France or to UK or to USA. Time now to cocoa bottle bear 300,000 or here 10 bottle 10 pe. The obey say sa bottle 10 no or the milk 70% and a bottle 10 pe bet my cocoa do one or the $100 here. Inti the demand for cocoa now around the world no akofom no say people are finding alternatives, other means of creating cocoa flavored products. Inti so what's the deal? Say over America. Now the Ghana cocoa Emma American Nino dear or say it is too bitter. Or it is too bitter. The reason is that omu cocoa ni chocolate 70 to 80% na milk. And omu bare 14% cocoa flavor. Into right now, they are not so much into Monkova cocoa free Africa mra in drones and in tons for American government or the German government or the Swedish or the European whatever to. They are not expecting so much again because oko Latin America, oko Ecuador, oko countries bia to say makana they are producing more cocoa. Inti enya Ghana nkwa ena at the end of the day no abrofo no to cocoa fi na Ivory Coast nkwa. No, it is because the supply no at the end of the day no the supply no it has basically exceeded the demand for the product. Ghana for saying and a more brochira, Momba more America. Eka say, Mamo Ghana chocolate omedida. They don't eat it. Why? It is because a brochira no any America for no any Europeans, no, even the Arabians, they have found other means. Omo pekwan fufuro bi omudi chocolates. Omo to me a whole milk, not omo the flavor, omo the technology, a creative flavor of chocolate. No omo the some milk into who dia na oh no ma. Why dream no? You smell it, you feel it say. a chocolate drink, but 90% of the content now on a milk. Until say tia as cocoa for say, na die ne be ye ma ye nso cocoa ye ne Ghana no, sebio ya hon chire ye aban no beto no se ne ye pe. Eno ntina me se tie mi. Enwumbre we cocoa kwani na wo hwe me a NPP ye nkwasiafo nim nyansa. Problem na da ho no eso. Na yo a reason a wo cocoa fo no cocoa akuafo no mobetumi edi so a ebema musika e wo se be come nsa na be come nsa. And reforms na a finance minister be kind, be kan ho asem, baba me kire obibi, and the one story way. And the Ivory Coast, Abidjan. Ivory Coast piles up as exporters reject fixed farm gate price amid global market setup. Slump, sorry. And the Ivory Coast for say, omu koko no, omu de kwa abrochira, ebo no pese omu toma abro for omu so omu nto. Adentina cocoa na brofo pe chocolate na brofo pe adentina ende Ivory Coast to me cocoa wedwum over 2.5 million tons omdu kodu abrocha brofo say ebo omo pe no mo beto because omo alternative. So wanto Ivory Coast for cocoa, wanto Ghana cocoa beto Ecuador for cocoa, wanto Ivory Coast cocoa, wanto Ghana cocoa obeto Latin America for cocoa, wanto Ivory Coast cocoa, wanto Ghana cocoa obeto Asia for cocoa. And the China munyina, Japan munyina, omunyina dia cocoa. The issue is window na be very small. Baby as can be free abano window no tokronum emu kata. Adentina tokronum si. You can also blame technology because and ya advance to the point abrofu to meet na fie. Omutu ni cocoa dia baba ako 1 seed. Omutu ni chocolate 4 boxes. Inti we Ghana now you kwani o Ghana because na den na ban betuma ye dia boa me. Ama me so cocoa kwani no me twa me cocoa e beto nyina because sia no ewiase ama no ne omu nyina nto cocoa no nti den ne ye beye alternative wo ho eni ntina nsam sia mamuntie politics no eno wo cocoa kwani wo na wo be lose now yanko Ivory Coast na me kire wade de ekoso Ivory Coast ni omu cocoa no afi aban se omu parking gudam because obi ani ho obeto.
Unsold bags of cocoa beans are piling up in Ivory Coast. And at Segnu Dagnogo's warehouse in the town of Douekwe, they're nearly at the ceiling. That's a sign of how a global slump in cocoa demand is coming up against a record high price set by the regulator in the world's top cocoa producer. Dagnogo says farmers trust his cooperative to sell their cocoa, which they can usually do quickly.
But honestly, things haven't been going well for quite some time now. So everything is at a standstill for the moment, and we currently owe the farmers a lot of money.
Dagnogo's hope is that the Coffee and Cocoa Council will step in. In January, the regulator launched a program to buy cocoa beans to help farmers. Concerns about declining cocoa inventories stored in poor conditions forced the regulator to accelerate those purchases earlier this month. That's after, at the start of the main crop harvest, the Coffee and Cocoa Council increased its marketing price to a record 2,800 CFA francs, or a little over $5 per kilogram. The aim was to improve farmers' income and ensure the development of the sector. But volatile global prices started to drop. Last week they hit their lowest levels in more than 2 years. Now farmer Frederic Kouassi says buyers won't pay the farm gate price. Instead, he says, they offer lower prices, something that's prohibited by the regulator.
In other words, they offer us a choice that doesn't suit us, and due to a lack of resources, we are forced to accept these prices.
For now, Kouassi is storing bags of beans in his home, but he doesn't want them to accumulate. The mid-crop, when cocoa farmers will harvest again, is approaching. Since the first crop has not been paid for and the accumulating cocoa beans become a burden, he says he could be forced to offload his inventory for a pittance. But he's facing the challenge with a positive outlook. The trees are still alive, he says, so you accept and never get discouraged. Unsold bags of cocoa beans are piling up.
Now, what the report and I say? This credit to Reuters. Ivory Coast na na wo hwe no. Omo si cocoa no eguo. Omo be so mton a ebo na omo gye na yesi entua enti cocoa no gugudam cocoa akuafo omo Ivory Coast on say we study bibia from time cocoa issues we start here from time NPP for we study say omo jimi omo about cocoa hunsem what is say cocoa farmer bi Ghana say me cocoa Ivory Coast akoton because Ivorians the cocoa mu tunton on say first no say cocoa hunsensem ba cocoa board hunsensem ba the obetia ne say oh ye de cocoa no ye de beko Ivory Coast and then I want to say NPP for catch cocoa ekuafo say mon fam cocoa no Ivory Coast because NPP for nim say Ivory Coast for no kra no omo brechen Ghana ekuafo what to baby say Ghana kra ni bi atam Ghana cocoa e de akwa Ivory Coast koton some yes price ne nye yes cocoa board for John Mahama aban e ya to forcing into say Ghana price ne nya adentina yenti say people are trying to smuggle Ghana's cocoa to Ivory Coast. It is because the only alternative na cocoa ekuafo no one say Ghana cocoa no price ne nya e be ko no omo wu say Ghana price ne ye cha Ivory Coast in the so ekuani a mema NPP for na ada wo NPP for ye gofo bi a omo ye toilet mummu a omo nim nyansa omo mbu cocoa ekuafo omo ji say cocoa ekuafo agimi into omo ba ya to price him and the na mo ba ye and abana dada omo boa omo nim say problem na omo cost no eno na NDC aban episode solve in this away when you to form pa da ben na what is NPP for and Ghana di because hey munko show there's say the Ghana cocoa na ye cheko Ivory Coast obia anya interested adentra because Ghana cocoa kueni ni hwe sika ekuta na the compare sika ekuta Ivory Coast ni na ni sika ye tua no Ghana no even though enye de na or expecting a better check Ivory Coast ni de no busa ho sa adentra every say aban we ya oteso no wa consider cocoa for omo plight. Even though world market ne prices ne nya no aban we ka say yeti cocoa bo no so no or consider cocoa for we or consider your neighbors check sika ye tuama your neighbors and or check Ghana cocoa akuafo de ka say we mu de ye ntumi ntuomo less than Ivory Coast for ye ntumi ntuomo less than Cameroon for ye ntumi ntuomo less than Nigeria for ye making sure say even though world market ne move from 12,000 a ton all the way to 3,300 no we are still going to pay them 70% of what is due them. Remember, NDC war position, catch Ghana force ekuafo say. So power. Say world market no price no kosura. Ana cocoa cry teswa. They will make sure say 70% of what at the end of the cocoa ekuafo no e say omonsaka no omonsabeka. And there's a we math no about cocoa cry teswa. They are still lingering around 70% no. That means aban way I consider cocoa ekuafo more than Ivory Coast for aban I consider Ivory Coast cocoa ekuafo. Mama chewa de. Won sa de we and the Ivory Coast story a few hoba. Story no was reported by Angie Aboagye by Reuters. So exclusive. Ivory Coast considers following Ghana with cocoa price cuts. Sources neka. And the Ivory Coast president and our bank cabinet atenase. Omo consider say Ghana sibi eti cocoa su kakra ema ya ho be high no. Ivory Coast ba beti di cocoa so. Adentina Ivory Coast think say ono de odia cocoa more than Ghana and that so keeping the cocoa abrofun be hia cocoa nti and the cocoa no demand ne kosora now eden now we release it at ono an price but Ivory Coast kra to ehun say even though he or it is the world leader when it comes to cocoa production when who say wanti the cocoa no so ambedru be bia Ghana for the edu na the cocoa ni nyina be say it is already story now that's what it says. Abidjan, February 18th, Reuters. That's what it said. Ivory Coast is considering cutting the price it pays farmers for cocoa beans to align with Ghana. Two government sources told Reuters as the world's biggest producers of the chocolate ingredient face a major crisis. The senior Ivory Coast officials said all options were on the table as the government debates whether to follow Ghana, which has already cut its farm gate price by 28.6% for the rest of the 2025-2026 season. Main crop in coordination with Abidjan as it adjusts to plunging prices. So we read this story now. You see Ghana, omati omukoko niso tie brofono. Rest of the 2025-2026 season main crop, meaning sa ebo ya abante so no, it will affect 2025-2026 cocoa yecha. from 2026 2027 no it can change. And changes no then at the beba the cocoa kuafo no yebema mate ase a ebetumi abo ma almost sika abo mubotom and ntin and dem abaha and ntin am already say me be chirechirem ama cocoa kuani na wo hwem na te ase se da bi e wo say ye bibi na sa bibi ni ya anya dia yani cocoa kuafo e wo Ghana sika say na wo say be kan nsa indi sa wo check stories amaken kan kire we a na say NDC aban ene eye Ghana cocoa kuafo di ye papa NDC aban oko Ivory Coast cocoa amoton ma aban no nka say cocoa we wa ye betua old price no aban say obeteso aban does not care whether cocoa wo ho cocoa ni ho. It means aban does not care about Ivory Coast for but Ghana aban no answer no obeteso no say well cocoa wa aban ho bia no say ebo na agenda da no ye betua ma na ye ko enim no now ye ba be vary options. Varying options can be, it can even multiply the money you are being paid, or as Abanas Akano, every day they will keep you at 70%. Now, Mamen Church will be bika kribi winchow. Say, what's your story we are? And I'm who story no. And what is it about? I'm say. Industrial and commercial workers, union and general agricultural workers, union GAU rejects proposed 10 to 20% salary cut for cocoa board management, terming it as unlawful and demoralizing, despite support for cocoa reforms. Now, say Ushe sa story where you see cocoa board for led by the CEO. Omate, omo salary so, omo chucha so say they be a cocoa board every month biano, ombenya 5 million Ghana cedis. And no nyame problem. My problem no eshe reforms no any ding. Reforms no and ama gold board abe gold board. Reforms no and any policies and any ideas and any de betumi aye asesa se ne ekoko ekuafo benye sika. Eno na John Mahama esma eye atoforcing eye den the finance minister ebe chirechire mu kire wo se aban na tenase ehu se enne enya Ghana nkwa na dua koko. Enya Ivory Coast nkwa na cocoa. In fact, ope amaya mu dua cocoa kura dodo ni Africa, meaning your competitors no are more advanced than us. Because come to think of it, when it comes to the processing of cocoa, I don't think we are more advanced than the Latin Americans. I don't think say processing of cocoa, menya sure say Ghana cocoa kuafo only advanced chain Malaysians or those people also growing cocoa. Until we need to find another way to make sure say cocoa kueni no ni sika no abeka ne nsama sika no sika esombo and then your friend reforms and no and atoforce be chirechire mu chireye enti sanka NPP for no omodo cocoa kuafo a de atoforce be chirechire mu chireye a o se ye ko ye nimu no nyoma wo se ye tenetene no ema cocoa kuani ni di ye no ene na nka o se ya adwene koso ye di hu nkomo na kwase be betena Facebook kwase be betena radio so ana aban no de o ye ne de on reverse decision wo ye jimifo. At the end of the day, Ghana kueni bi enim say Ghana kobo besia ansane atonu cocoa beans. How can we live in a country e was say ekwaji besia ansana ya ba beto Ghana kueni cocoa aban we person otwa sade anim. Now the reset na John Mahama kan no se ne betumi ama nyoma ankase gina ne naso abaye ye ne ankase ye dia de sika beba ebotom no eno na aban we san hyehyeye na John Mahama ne NDC for edeba. Because you cannot live in a sovereign country and the cocoa kueni or what trapiase edo cocoa no na e was say aban etoto nwurem ko abrochire ekobo besia wo broni ho e de beto free ni nsem dabi se ebe sa na cocoa kueni no wabaye den wabaye slave wabaye akwa ama broni Joma ama so beso twa sa de no so because eno na ama eye Ghana cocoa board cocoa ya beto ekamua from 90 kodo ho ebe sin there for almost 79 years yen to me free akanim every say sa cocoa na ye twa no Ghana cocoa kueni ye hu adwuma no eni say ye kwa broche ko bo besia beto Ghana cocoa kueni cocoa dabi e was say ye to me find way bi a Ghana ni cocoa kueni no all do the cocoa ro him say sa cocoa no me do wi a me twa menya otofo Ghana ama sabio enya de o say aban ebe ka kire be say okwa abrochire no we nya besia intedwuma ma ye nyina ayekwa dabi. Respectfully, manisi sumina so cocoa etise ebro cocoa etise cashew the ma cocoa unique from these other things I'm mentioning say process na cocoa komu no tedious cocoa kweni the ma sebio yesum omo anase omo sum boma ye ne say ebro kweni ana obi a oye kweni a otwa cashew ana obi a oye kweni a otwa bode no de ema Ghana for sum cocoa kuafo no dodo ne say nyoma amu fam ansa na maka say yenya cocoa boto no enye nyoma ketwa inti sebio so anko obi ebrofuo ko a farmer ana obi a cocoa farmer na nke ni say say oh we are picking a cocoa farmer over a maize farmer. No, because ebro enso fidi man pa, but the reason tiana de bia yakoma da cocoa for no say ejuma no from the day a wobedua cocoa no anytime a wobetwa ayehu adwuma say Aboagye atum say yebeto no na enye adwuma ketwa sebio obi twa ebro no so ye na ayeden na wotwa wapuro ebro no de gubotom ba cocoa kweni also cocoa ekotwa cocoa no ogu cocoa ase oti cocoa ni frim ohata osafifa cocoa no so enda ne danim emme cocoa no ayeden ansa no hu se muanim ansa na wahye ne boto de na ya say ende your Ghana cocoa kweni ana Ghana government was say yekwa crab boto he ekuro bia ni wiase a ende omde boto and store cocoa. The advanced countries no omotumi SCC modern silos modern facilities a cocoa no omotumi store cocoa no wa because we are in 2026 and we are still looking at cocoa bottle. Ye cocoa bottle and sani asisa cocoa gum ya swani ya kon there's advanced areas na konenim. Now yen to the aban we person yama u cocoa kweni eno na wo se we cocoa kweni a oti radio ho oti TV ho a ubusa ho se na politicians to wakasa kase da mi cocoa kweni de na menya eno ne nkoma a wo se yedi hwe se politicians ti TV so NPP for TV so omu yedede omu kasa because they are paid to do that. Miracle Aboagye ba cocoa krase wo no sebi cocoa fuonim no sebi cocoa kuafo no ho de oye no ye tua ne ka enti ode wo na agi ni pay ohu cocoa kwedi na sebi se wadwene wo form sebi omu ohu sebi a wotie krase enti so mo ba wo ho na so mo bejeje cocoa edua na se abu so mo se camera na edi wo chi ba ho na tiaye Some people for the ba krase na omde car be sisi wa bu so mo se car na sisi wo no ho na top petrol gumu sa omo ba ukoko ekurase say ye be press conference am bu so mo say why na etuam hotel bills am eye ade a omo ye agi sika eye business no mo de mo ye eye ade a omo ye abankran abagi sika sa video no omo betwa mo a omo bon kan omo ton ma news fo so omo ba mu nkromo na mo so omo ne koko ekuafo be di enkomo e na koko abana te so a enye wo koko ekuani na odwene hu ode wo ye business ode wo ba be kire enkranfo se me ko ekurase na enso en Ghana he na ekurase oba ukoko fuom eho na wote eho na wonyini ye ukoko fuoro wagya pade no but Okatakyie Ghana for say mo ye koko ekuafo omo ti koko ekuafo omo ti koko ase e na omo ho kire omo dabi koko ekuafo omo Ghana omo nya hiafo politicians when they create ohiane to mutrim because there are so many ways koko ekuafo betume diye nanso enkoma wo se ye di ankasa no NPP for any politicians be so mu bedi omo pese omo dada koko ekuafo ni bi na omo adwene be omo se obi na di hia beto omo so dabi se koko ekuafo no enya butre tie de ye ka omo be hu se enkomo no mu di no en benefit omo na enkomo na ankasa wo ho enkomo na ankasa wo so mu di no mu ni de ebe benefit wo koko kuani na wote twa piase wote atonkombra no eno no NPP for ndi san komo ni nkire wo de ebe ma wa adwene ye wo se obi tan na sebi wo koko no na obi mpese obedi ye because ode wo koji sika won kran ma me nkire wade bi wo hu sa ade we ato forcing ebe kasai mu me nya abote na menwudwe mu nkire koko ekuafo ye wi a na enyina ye hu solution to problem o honde ato force kasa o say problems are cocoa board face any
because it has become uncompetitive and very expensive. Cocoa from other producing countries is now selling at a price significantly lower than that of Ghana's producer price. Meanwhile, Cocoa Board did not have the liquidity to purchase cocoa from farmers and stock for hedging or other trading decisions. This was due to the financing model invented in the year 2024-2025, when the syndicated loan failed. Under that model, the buyers financed the purchase. By 2022, Cocoa Board finances had deteriorated badly. It defaulted and restructured the cocoa bills in the year 2023. For the first time in the history of the cocoa industry, in 2023, the annual syndicated suffered significant delays due to the loss of confidence in the Ghanaian economy and the sector. The first tranche was received on 22nd December 2023, 4 months after the commencement of the season. Cocoa Board projected an output of 800,000 tons and committed 786,672 tons in contracts in 2023 and 2024 crop season. However, actual production was 432,145 tons, a deviation of over 45% from the projected output. Variation in crop forecasts typically vary between 5 to 15%. Hence, a deviation of 45% was unprecedented and unacceptable. This resulted in a huge rollover contract of about 333,767 tons at an average price of $2,661 per ton. This resulted in a loss of over $1 billion, which would have gone to the cocoa farmer or other stakeholders. In 2024, Cocoa Board could not pay the final tranche of the syndicated loan, which was due in July 2024, and received a $70 million bridge finance from the Ministry of Finance to avert a default. Despite a commitment to repay the $70 million bridge finance owed to the Ministry of Finance, Cocoa Board defaulted, highlighting the dire financial straits of the organization at the time. This debt has since been inherited by the current administration and the current management of the Ghana Cocoa Board.
Okokweni na utiemia. Dena Finance Minister kano ebe sinne. NPP mba bontin mekancho said the Finance Minister kan na yatro. Or say from 2022 ebe si 2024 loan na NPP aban kwaje ye. Say omo be to koko ekuafo edien bu koko efri mu nsem 2022 sa loan no mkwaje ye no omo ntumi mpo an supply eye koko na eduaba na mode ma omo no omo ntumi mpo an fa anko supply ntumi an make sure say sa eye ekana yakobo ato no yebetumi dia kotua inti NPP during the time omo teso from 2022 no every year bia e wo se omo tumi etia eka edaho a sebio sa eka no mutua nka be ma kokofo hu ahinha omo no kokokuafo ahinha omo no na every day bia no omo ye ne carry forward inti even when cocoa a ton equal to 11,000 to 12,000 no now still NPP are buying to mean for over 70%, all because they could not at the end of the day even supply the cocoa seeds. I didn't tell them to supply cocoa seeds no because not to mean to cocoa in for no PBs na egu na to me emba cocoa for any sikanto every say na abine deka abane entuma hwe sikasam so ye intina Cocoa Board ete no ye de sika guma na enwunu enti cocoa kuafo no even at when cocoa near ton 11,000 to 12,000 no na nka so sa time no sika na nka wo se ekufo ado aban e ma cocoa kuafo no na enye ehu sika na no de ma cocoa kuafo Ghana and me no ka say sa 12,000 per ton no abedu 3,300 inti when na ti Ghana obe expect say sika na ekufo de 11,000 to 12,000 a ton na onya every cocoa no na go well how are you expecting John Mahama buying to pay you the same amount? But do you know the interesting thing? John Mahama buying eba power no, this is the first time in the history of Ghana buying to be two cocoa twice quickly. And interestingly enough, even though cocoa buakra atiaba 3,000 from 12,000 no, still Oba West Africa ha and some part of Africa you produce cocoa pa Ghana for cocoa for the tuomo kakese because John Mahama catch the Ghana for say to me beka NDC for nsa say ti cocoa suo cocoa kosra especially cocoa board nya 70% dear or some tuama cocoa for and intina ende Ivory Coast for crack catcher say omo pese omo be Ghana for price no mo tia the same as omo cocoa farmers because someone will say 70% na John Mahama peg, it is the best in West Africa and in the world. Now we are cocoa crania team. At first be a press conference or can in Sambia na ehia say I was a radio 4 TV 4 actually much Ghana for the cocoa for send your baby would the airco the day nim and the betuma boama cocoa for enya sika abeto botum enie mumientie na menjum.
Now I will take you to the proposed reforms. A careful, and I won't say proposed reforms, these are reforms that I'm going to implement immediately. A careful review of the cocoa sector over the last 8 years revealed gross mismanagement, which requires immediate and comprehensive reforms to address the challenges in the sector. Cabinet has therefore decided on the following reforms to guarantee a fair price to the cocoa farmer, secure the financial viability of the cocoa sector, and ensure the long-term sustainability of the cocoa industry. To bring relief to unpaid cocoa farmers, Cabinet has accordingly directed the Ghana Cocoa Board to commence immediate repayment of all affected cocoa farmers. 2. A new Cocoa Board bill will be presented to Parliament to implement an automatic adjustment of producer price to align with movement in the world market price, exchange rate, and other key variables, and guarantees a minimum of 70% of gross FOB price to be paid to the cocoa farmer. A new finance will be presented to Parliament to implement an automatic adjustment of producer price to align with movement in the world market price, exchange rate, and other key variables, and guarantees a minimum of 70% of gross FOB price to be paid to the cocoa farmer. A new financing model for cocoa purchases and related operations with associated benefit for increased processing will be introduced effective 2026-2027 crop season. The current financing model was invented as a necessity after the syndicated loan failed, after 32 years of successful implementation, and it was proven not to be sustainable. In fact, it has proven not to be sustainable. The financing model is entirely dependent on a buyer's willingness to bear the financing costs and to pre-finance the purchase of cocoa. The key motivation for buyers in the previous season was the rollover contract priced at a rate of $2,661 per metric ton, when the existing market price were above $8,000 per metric ton. Once the gap between the rollover contract and the market price closes, and the majority of the rollover contracts are serviced, the buyer will not be willing to pre-finance the purchase of cocoa crop. Alternatively, the previous syndicated loan model requires that Cocoa Board sells forward most of the raw beans to lock in the contract, which repays the loan and serves as collateral as well. This system did not allow Cocoa Board to optimize prices on the market. In addition, the use of raw beans contract as collateral for the loan meant that Ghana could not optimize its installed capacity for processing. The new financing model will utilize domestic cocoa beans to purchase cocoa. The new financing model will utilize domestic cocoa bonds to purchase cocoa and repay the cocoa proceeds within each crop year. The bonds will be used to raise a revolving fund for Cocoa Board to turn around at least once during the season. The model will also revive the indigenous licensed buying companies that have been completely thrown out of business as a result of the current financing model. State-owned produce buying company, PBC, will be revived to resume full operations and become the leading license buying company in the cocoa sector with immediate effect. With the new financing model, Cocoa Board can sell beans of any volume to local processing companies to promote value addition and job creation. Cabinet has, however, directed that with immediate effect, the remainder of the beans for the crop year 2025-2026 should be allocated for domestic processing. Cabinet has also directed that beginning from 2026 to 2027 crop season, a minimum of 50% of all cocoa beans should be processed locally. And this will be part of the Cocoa Board bill going to Parliament. Pursuant to this, the state-owned cocoa processing company, CPC, will be revived as a matter of priority to become the leading processor of Ghana's cocoa beans. I've also, this morning, together with my colleague, the Minister responsible for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, met with domestic cocoa processors cutting across the private sector, who have indicated that they have the capacity and the willingness to process more than 50% of Ghana's cocoa beans going forward. An agreement has been reached on the immediate implementation of this policy. In order to address the indebtedness inherited by the current management of Ghana Cocoa Board, Cabinet has further directed that the Minister responsible for Finance, myself, to urgently seek parliamentary approval for the following. 1, to convert the legacy debt of about 5.8 billion Ghana cedis owned to the Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana. Cocoa Board currently owes the Ministry of Finance 3.7 billion Ghana cedis, which arose from the conversion of non-marketable cocoa bills into a loan, and the Bank of Ghana another 10-year loan of 1.38 billion Ghana cedis. The debt conversion will restore positive equity and boost the international and local market to support the operations of the Ghana Cocoa Board. Now I will take you to the proposed reforms.
Oya cocoa kweni na utiemia. Aha ana nanka wose nkomone ko. Aha na na wose nkomone ko. Nanso nkomone ko gina nkomone ko gina eyede nkomone ko gina Randi Abbey. Yempe Randi Abbey. Nkomone ko gina Cocoa Board ena NDC baye ena ya NDC fo no omaku cocoa kuafo ompe cocoa kuafo asem ena cocoa kuafo ma entimi nko school NPP fo mpesa wo betie we ni asam no adenti no mancheche we manchire wo ede na ato force ne se president se yenye de na ato force ne kan nyina no na eye cocoa kueni no ho beto ne ntira reforms say ye di nyoma betutu kwan mu de na ye ne dada no ye be jai ne ye ne foforo na cocoa kueni no ne ho ato no enti the priority of the president and the government is to make sure say cocoa kueni ne de wa fam mbre bia osene ninje ho no saa de no onfam biem adentina yama ye ni anko sansem we hu adentina ye ni akogina ene yese Randi Abbey no or your Metro TV. I don't care about Randi Abbey because Randi Abbey can be changed any day. Anybody can come. If we don't have better reforms, Cocoa Board will still be Cocoa Board. We will still incur crazy debts, and that is the basics. Those are the basics. Cocoa Board, you bet to the years to betna ho. Say you need the right reforms. Say you need agri ya sanyo mem. Ama abanen take a drastic decision. I bet to me a protect Ghana kuenina. You bet my NPP phone kwasi afo betna TV so. Say see almost started na TV so kasa ye ten cry no. Wa wote a kontomra. Again I am. Boy ya obegina ho Dennis Miracle Aboagye begina ho ojimi no hwen ekura bi asebe na ote. Ne huni ba pen o cocoa kue ni de wu koma na dwi onim otenkan di jantrafo o de wanim ekogi sika won kran obeton wanim e na o da beji sika won kran se hwe cocoa kuafo no omu wu enso odu nkran a emfa no ho omu di to me 8 years sa video me boy yi brofo na finance minister ka atofo se John Mahama tenase o se yenyen hyehyeye na cocoa kue ni no sebio ne kra ni sub ne edi obra obren yensesa no. That is what we call leadership. Omo pese in sakrayeba. And this in person so na waka say ai ene eba no say na nyoma tie no sa it is syndicated loan ye kwaji loan NDC nye ready NDC say senior koko kweni na breno John Mahama say yemfa nhihye yemra senior tumi de nhihye ba and obia elbow gold board so no just so say gold board ibo adwuma Sami Jemfi ibo adwuma no. This is the same thing and we need to bite it hard. Uye koko kweni a san komo we ne hia na ma menche na atofo seneka sa no all start no say de na omo be ka kire Ghana fo nyina ne reforms o maye no ebe guarantee fair price to the farmer long term investment omo be so mo ye e wo koko kweni into see in some na John Mahama echo cabinet omo kan nyina ne say omo pe eboa enyo china ne o chinechi koko farmer nya 100 Ghana na atiaba 30 Ghana na ko 120 Ghana o see omo de nyawa betutu kwan mu a koko kweni ni sika no bebie gina no dollar kosuru dollar ba fomo sa koko kweni nim se mi sika we di obi anfa nsanka because ochina John Mahama ni wa se yanhemra obi so baba ka say John Mahama the dollar ne ba 10 anything ne etua okawe and the dollar no 23 ntimi tua John Mahama so person oyi sa de free wo na obi ye koko kweni a onim se osore a se dollar no wo fomo dollar no wo suru onim se dollar no esiri trase kura ye wo ebuo bi dawa ye fa ni base price sa ebuo no eno de e wo se koko kweni ne onya atofo se ne kasa no o say de ye nyina from titiri nyina ne say cocoa board de omo ya ne say omo sori na mokobo besia omo kobo besia ye ntumi ntia besia no hwanam no mo kire omo koko kuafo o se sesia no John Mahama ka kire eye aban we say koko kuani bia ode ni koko akoma aban ewa abra na atofo se ne kasa na ewo se animanim ha ye tua ne ka enitina ende 237 million Ghana cedis koko kuani bia ukoko wa aban ho no ye betua wo saa ebo na ewo ho ansa na saa reforms we ba enti bibia nsesan 2026-2027 season no enyandru ye 2025-2026 no wa ukoko wa aban ho bia no ye release 237 million Ghana cedis ye betua obia sika ama no na okasa no say this nyoma bia omda to kwan mu a eba be sakra asesa koko sene ye to no ene sene koko akuani no ho be henha na emba say politicians ba na omudi agro John Mahama mpese politician bia beba biem edi koko akuani na be di agro efri say koko ya de bia esombo so obi koko akuadwuma mu a na wana adwene say obeye dwuma edin so e wo say unya akatua pa edi John Mahama say e wo say ye make sure say now ben was nkwa de koko akuafo no ye nja omo into say one o me bibia friend cocoa bill now cocoa board bill no the ben say ye friend be automatic adjustment now automatic adjustment in say cocoa boy ye tuma automatically at least eye cocoa kwani say ya tum every $1 akọ $30 cocoa kwani no automatically ni cocoa be kosoro o say opeso o share say eyemra ena Samira no de ebe ne se koko se bio dollar ne ko from kra omo be set price bi ato a it does not matter how low cocoa dollar price will go down no ana world market ne be go down no cocoa kuafo omo Ghana de say 10 cedis ne betu omo a cocoa ne betuma koduru 1 peso a Ghana ni cocoa ni no ne 1 bag ne betu an 10 cedis because aban ne pese o protect cocoa kwani no enti de John Mahama bill or de ba no de ebe ne say so koko kwani nde e wo Ghana na ende dollar no sebio koko yese dollar kosoro akoduru 50 enti eton koko bag bia $30,000 one bag. John Mahama say ye behwe sa board ho ni etua oka o see say dollar no so tiba form na beduru $1 koko bag bia $1 o see Ghana buying the price bi beto sa price ni say dollar no beduru bebiness e wo form kra sa price ni de yentumi ton less than that. That means cocoa bag no John Mahama buy no omunwe bill we no na the standard price bia beto a it does not matter how the dollar fluctuates or the world markets fluctuate no your base cocoa price no will be there enti emfon any cocoa senia dollar no ana world market ni be ko form e betima tia ba $100 a bag Ghana ni cocoa kweni no se base price na 50 Ghana cedis a ono de otam no cocoa na oton ema Ghana ban ana omo aban ama mutumi so monto a 50 Ghana but ekosoro so a sa price na akodu no cocoa kweni no e say tia no at least 70% of that price, and this is adia na e wo say cocoa kuafo ye chirechire mu a NPP fo nkwasiafo mpese mu behu nti eba sa na cocoa kweni wo Ghana. What is going to happen? And I say ya took cocoa, hallelujah. Ya took cocoa, so I would problem because what base price are you are working with? Inti, I'm funny say, and the dollar ya what any at about $1 no. You funny say and the dollar no. Aqua, you say cocoa price ya teso every 3,000 be do 1,000. What dear? Wouldn't say Ghana no. Ya took cocoa so saying cry at least cocoa bag be 50 Ghana. What dear? Wouldn't say I am ya say. Se cocoa no ye tuma could do 100,000 a ban so be 70% of that 100,000 inti left or right cocoa queen no Samira we banner parliament jituma cocoa queen no ondi here biom world market na enye cocoa queen no problem. The only time obesha world market say cost stroke sia na ni age if you say ko 1 million per bag obenya about 70% of that 1 million say a drop it below. Still, our base price are autumn cocoa, which is 5 Ghana cedis and 10 Ghana cedis and 300 Ghana cedis. Or them say they cannot go below that. That is what NPP from Pesemubu. NPP from him says, John Mahama Bino, et me the idea way, eba mrem, nebe yembra, cocoa kweni bien wa obedinya, cocoa kweni bien wa nakuma, sebio ebebody bribri. Adentra, hey, you say the cocoa price lack of form, or only problem. The one say also a cocoa the gum because only at the end of the day, on him say your base price. Cocoa dollar ko fomo dollar ko fomo e ko fom ko sisan onim se ori de Ghana no dollar ko fom kra cocoa de to the say say dollar cost so a the percentage ni cost so at the end of the day no san komo we na o say cocoa kuafo frɛ from nyonko ka say and the moma yema ban pressure na o ma Samira we mra dan say NPP for to catch am say aban we atwadi na cocoa kuafo su aban we protect cocoa kuani. Into this is the time it was a cocoa kuafo started fresh from home in nobwa cooperatives mu leadership rekajom say mumaya mo aban mumya ni aban din sawoso na aban empa Samira we every say ende aban pa Samira na cocoa bag ana ton e could do $50,000. What is going to happen is say yani cocoa kuafo you bet you 70% of the $50,000. Say a tiba 2,000 a bag your base price yesiba kubia bottle ba kubia 300 Ghana 300 Ghana inti world market na etwitiba be si from kra cocoa kweni o Ghana emfa no ho na djuma no oye. Remember the same cocoa kweni no onya fertilizer free, the same cocoa kweni onya spray free, the same cocoa kweni onya insecticide free, the same cocoa kweni is being protected by the government and no na John Mahama pasoye because on one kasa so oye cocoa kweni iti in komono omo pese mo be hu komono na omo de omo jandam NPP fo agimi eni ginam si cocoa kuafo edu sometime munya abotre na afa muntie nsem no ensem a finance minister kai no ye Ghana nkosi yebo say o sanka cocoa kuafo nyina etisi krom e ka say this is what we have been waiting for. Wey Ivory Coast for nya sa bill we enya Samira we bia anka Ivory Coast for nkomu nya betesi krom aye dede aka say aban na boa cocoa for aban we de ode ba no eya de ebe so cocoa for asene mama yemfa ni agro sa nyoma no mka kan Facebook ni omoboa NPP for him say the moment John Mahama ebe implement sa de we a parliament be giatum no NPP mba power biem within a year from 2027-2028 cocoa kuafo ombe bom nsem because around that time no ye nya cocoa kuani bi obeka say yes ati cocoa so enti anya me koton ayate cocoa bag so no only time they be cocoa yentum because yetuma your price goes up 70%. Yet tisuba from kra your base price are set to Ghana and no the cocoa prices ni say kra e ho ane to cocoa no. That is what we are all talking about. Etima mo mien NPP for mo Jimmy omu politics omu nim say nyoma John Mahama eye no say agini nyina tuma enya ade a omu nkwasi party me power biem enti NPP for ba mo ha no bu so mo say na mo enti John Mahama say emra na person de ko parliament no emra ne say to cocoa buo mu a ekoso so a yebenya mu about 70 to 80%. Yeti cocoa so a the Indian say your base price your bobia ye betwa to sa abo no cocoa yetum ko si from kra sa abo no de yentum ton ye cocoa less than that. Adentina mama ye nyina support sa de no Mumusomo, Adentina Mumwaye, Mboye Cocoa Quiafo, my Antia Siema Ghana for who say, John Mahama and this buying air Jini Cocoa Quiafo. Now, policies ni bi and answer reforms ni bi no ebini. Almost say, eye cocoa na and yet no Ghana no. Te see abrofo no, nipa bebre edua cocoa. Ema te see ano demand no a owiase no. Omo say the bi bebre o ha ye den. Ye cocoa inti abrofo no. Oma kuma nhyeda ni Ghana nko na Ivory Coast ho. Die ebetuma ne say, John Mahama ban pese ode mra bi ba. Cocoa ye bedua ni Ghana na about 70% or say todo Ghana. I will say a top Sakoko no Ghana because NPP abanja a cabe 5 billion and then John Mahama ban say sa eka da hono Cocoa wrote near the idea shemu or say na Cocoa board at the Bank of Ghana ka almost 3 billion at the a kankitin kitibi and then or say finance minister emphasize kan nswa no mpe ekwa bi ne entua se sia no opese o clinic Cocoa board for slate so se ne be ya Cocoa akuafo no Cocoa na ye betwa afia edi enim de ekono dodo no ye betoro Ghana ya PBC ana munyina munim eye Cocoa eye produce buying company a na mu di adwuma ma aban a sebio ende me no ka sei eye PBC no egu no ende de akosi ni se John Mahama aban ama PBC for to mean se Cocoa atoto no ye de dodo na hye omunsem uye Cocoa akuani wo Ghana na utwa Cocoa a emrashe PBC say omuwe Cocoa na Cocoa ni gina na so na eye a oso moto because pese Cocoa dodo no pese ye de kwakoji loan pese sa Cocoa dodo no ye ne ankasa Ghana na ye to na ye process di ho adwuma into companies nkete a pese omko into Cocoa processing ye de bi be ye cake ye de bi be ye chocolate ye de bi be ye Milo ye de bi be different no you see ye ba beton a processing of Ghana ama Ghana for companies no dodo no ato enough and sana de be kechire no John Mahama buy den akoton wa mo no
NPP cannot be underestimated.
The MPP of Darocha, Sakiskek, Victor Usu, Kofi Buzia, Professor Edubuahe, Alajete, J.A. Kufuor, those men of value, those men of integrity are not what we have today. I tell you without mincing words, the 5 people who are contesting, wanting to be flag bearers, are just sankwas. I tell you without mincing words, the 5 people who are contesting, wanting to be flag bearers, are just sankwas. I tell you without mincing words,